twins ran that part of London like an iron rod. There was nothing that went on in that East End that they didn't know about. If there was a wrongdoing, get off the manor, because they would come down on you like a ton of bricks.
Welcome back to another Kray video. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss any videos. And for people really interested in the Krays, check out our private Facebook group, Krays, Crime Lords of London. We're a friendly and moderated group which has been running since January 2018. Please come and give us a try.
Welcome back. We continue my story of my time with the Krays. They were crazy days. My name is Albert Donoghue. I was chief growler and rent collector for Ronnie and Reggie right up to 1968, when we were all arrested by Nipper Reid and his Scotland Yard team. Since Frank Mitchell's murder, I'd twice been sent by the twins to see Lisa Prescott to keep her sweet. Lisa was the nightclub hostess who had stayed with Frank the Mad Axeman Mitchell to keep him happy in his Barking Road flat bolt hole in East Ham. But when Exley finally told the cops everything he knew, he gave them a crucial lead to Lisa, who naturally told them everything. So at last the twins' paranoia was justifying itself. Meantime, Johnny Squibb and Big Tommy Brown were noticed by their absence. And you'd certainly notice if Big Tommy wasn't around. A typical prize fighter, 6'3", big, broad, handsome, and with snow-white hair when he went missing, it was as striking as if St. Paul's Cathedral had disappeared overnight. He and Squibby had clearly gone on the trot deliberately, so among the rest of us on the inner firm, there was a feeling of gloom and doom. Ever since Cornell's murder, we all knew it was going to come off. It was just a question of time. None of us was totally innocent. We were all going to get nicked. That's an occupational hazard in this game. But it was a question of minimizing our own final sentence. What can I do to cut mine down? That's all each of us could think of by this stage. So we didn't want to get involved in anything too heavy, and we covered our tracks even more carefully. That's how we had to carry on. We were walking on eggshells. I knew the hammer was coming down sometime, but it was a matter of how hard it would hit me in particular. It would do me no good going to church. Even emigrating to Australia wouldn't have got me out of it. I was still going to get nicked, but for how long? The law wasn't the only danger. A far bigger danger was the twins themselves. At any moment, they might turn against you directly and try and finish you off. There was always the chance that even by accident, you could do something that would spark them off. You could be done for saying the wrong word. You might talk to somebody who they've heard is cooperating with the police, so they might think you were in there with that traitor, cooking something up, preparing your own destiny. We were all remembering how Jack the Hat went, for no justifiable reason, and George Cornell, so we knew we could be next, even if we'd done absolutely nothing to deserve it. They could invite me to a meet one night, then bang, I'm the next one for disposal. It might not be a bang. It could be something in your tea, as I realized when I was sent on my next murder mission. Having killed the man who failed to kill Leslie Payne, the twins still had the problem that Payne himself was alive and talking to the police, just like Exley. This too later proved to be true. In January 1967, he had made a 146-page statement to Nipper Reid. So, who else is squealing, was the question raging through the twins' skulls now. They focused on a guy called Purvis, who was one of their front men for the long-firm frauds. He was the outwardly respectable type, used to open bank accounts, get credit, and order the goods until the bust-out happens. when he sacrifices his good name and liberty and goes down for 3 or 4 years. He did it with his eyes open, but early in 1968 he was in Pentonville prison, maybe on some unrelated crime, but clearly vulnerable to an approach by the dreaded Reed. He was also vulnerable to other prisoners, so we were very interested to learn that Colin Dukey Osborne was in transit from one nick to another and stopping over in the Ville. Dukey was one of Ronnie's former boyfriends. He was also the guy who drove me to Bow after I'd been shot by Reggie. He'd since been jailed over some other business, but was still considered a friend of the firm. So with another guy, I was sent into the Ville to sound him out on administering some poison to Purvis. If Dukey could get to him, if he was in the same wing or they ate at the same sitting. The idea was for him to put some stuff in Purvis's porridge, soup or dinner. But would Osborne be agreeable? We had to watch his reaction. As an old member of the firm, he was bound to say, yeah. Was he enthusiastic or did he just nod? Was he half-hearted or all for it? In my view, he was not keen. He nodded. Oh yeah, but he didn't jump at it. I reported this back to the twins and the scheme went no further, not with me anyway. It wasn't my job to get the poison into the Ville, and as far as I know, no one ever did spike Purvis's porridge. So yet another failed murder conspiracy, thank God. But this one taught me to watch out for an attempt to do the same to me a few months later. They say the prospect of death concentrates the mind wonderfully, which is why we cooked up our own safety codes. Like the Jake routine I operated with my partner, Ronnie Hart. I still take precautions now sometimes. If you go on a meet somewhere, you have a look at which cars are outside and if there's anybody loitering about. You are always that aware. This caution is probably a good thing. It may be why I'm still alive. It may be why some other folk survive too. I always tried to cover for my colleagues on the firm, like I had with Connie Whitehead that time at the Starlight, because it could happen to anyone any day. We were all on tippy toes, looking out for each other. After McVitie, we started wondering if the twins were killing other people without telling us. They always operated a need-to-know system. If you weren't supposed to hear about something, you wouldn't hear about it. So when people went missing, they could easily have been bumped off by the twins without us knowing. We even got into thinking they'd murdered all sorts of absent friends who would confound us later by turning up alive and well. This is what happened with a driver of Ronnie's called Billy Frost. We thought this little Frosty had gone, but he hadn't. Not that you ever dared say, so-and-so's gone missing, I think they've killed him. You just accepted this sort of thing. We also noticed that the twins were now aiming even more of their spies than usual at us who were still on the firm. One of their agent provocateurs would suddenly blast off, I'm getting a bit pissed off with Ronnie, he's saying this and that, I think I could do him. So he'd say to this person, if you feel like that, why don't you go and tell him yourself? What are you telling me for? We knew Ronnie was slipping these little rats in to test us for loyalty. He was always looking for plots against him and Reggie. Nowadays, the word psycho gets knocked about a bit. It's used too lightly and too often. But I'm sure Ronnie was a psycho. He really did enjoy hurting people. And when we saw his murderous paranoia at its worst, this only drove the rest of us on the firm to thinking we might have to kill them both before they tried to kill us. We did half discuss popping them off, to kill them. We knew we would have had to separate them first, but that was easy. Ronnie was wide open because when he was in a car, he would always sit in the front passenger seat. The idea cropped up once when neither twin was with us. We were all getting in the car when, naturally enough, somebody sat alongside the driver. So someone else said, "Oh, hello, he's in the colonel's seat," and we all had a laugh. Then someone else said, "Dangerous place that, when you got a couple of sharpshooters in the back like us." Then someone said, "Yeah, must be as easy as that. Quick trip down Rotherhithe Tunnel and just wait till a lorry passes." If we had put this scheme into action, we'd have got the right driver and a couple of carefully selected people sitting in the back. Then we'd take Ronnie through the Blackwall or Rotherhithe Tunnel, and bang! It's finished. Just dump him the other side of the river in Indian country. We'd have had to kill Reggie straight after that, somewhere quiet, but once we'd killed them both, we wouldn't have had to kill Charlie. We'd have frightened Charlie, but he would not have known the killings were down to us. The twins had so many enemies, we weren't going to be the prime suspects, especially when the bodies were found in South London. He might suspect it was us, but if he'd made a move, he would have had to go too. If you're into killing Ronnie and Reggie, you're not going to spend any sleepless nights over killing Charlie, but that wouldn't have been necessary. This was not idle chat. We were genuinely contemplating it as a what if, but not as a conspiracy. We never reached the planning stage because no one knew if anyone who was in on the discussion might slip back and report to the other two. The only people we could trust to discuss it, even on this level, were Connie Whitehead, Ronnie Hart, myself, and probably Scotch Jack. Nobody else. So it was said half-jokingly, then somebody else might say, "Yeah, but if that happened, it'd be all over," which took the edge off it. This meant that, if the twins heard about it, you could tell them it was just a joke. We weren't seriously discussing it, but we all knew inside that if together we'd have decided that killing the twins would have worked out in our favor, they would have gone. No doubt about that at all. To get away with it completely, we would have had to wait until they had had a fallout with another firm, someone really tasty, so they would be expecting a comeback. Then we could do it and pretend it was the comeback. The other thing was that, as long as the twins were around, we had a kind of license for our activities. We realized that if they were popped, if we wiped them out, we would be open to all sorts of warfare. We couldn't have carried on without them. We'd have had to go into different lines of business. Once they had been killed, even by persons unknown, the police would have stamped all over us. Old Bill would definitely have walked straight in and wiped the lot of us up. The twins were a definite benefit to us, in the sense that they had psyched out the Metropolitan Police as a whole, securing a coating of immunity for themselves and everyone who worked for them. They had created a myth around themselves that even the police believed. If the cops had known just how chaotically the twins ran their day-to-day business, they would have nicked them long ago, even for something quite trivial. Then when they came out of jail, they could have nicked them again and repeatedly given them a hard time. But the police thought they were some highly well-organized international gang, when they weren't at all. All this talk of mafia connections was just fantasy. They would just drop hints here and there, and people would pick it up, embroider it, and spread it around. That's how a couple of characters whose entire take from extortion in London every week wasn't much over £1,000 had grown into a multi-million-pound corporation in the eyes of many coppers. True, they had some spectacular one-off coups, like Esmeralda's barn before they destroyed it, and a few good rip-offs with stolen bonds. But they would blow the proceeds and then be back on the scrounge for 10s and 20s from East End piss holes. The only people who knew they were just penny anti-punks were the punks working with them, and ultimately Superintendent Nipper Reed and his squad. the early months of 1968, we could all feel the angel of death hovering over the firm. I'm sure the strain damaged my family, though I wasn't sensitive to that. For over 3 years, I'd been working a 16-hour day with these people. Quite often, we'd spend weekends away with them too. When I look back, I can see that was wrong. It destroyed real home life. But at the time, it was just my way of earning a living. I went home when I could and stayed away when I couldn't. My wife never said anything like, "Did you have a nice day at the firm?" As long as I had a clean shirt and I looked tidy, that would be it. She'd say, "While you're out, get your hair cut." But she must have noticed how I withdrew into myself, especially after Frank Mitchell's murder. But even I didn't know just how close I'd come to being put on the list myself. I was only told afterwards that Ronnie had become increasingly worried because I had gone through a few of the firm, including Scotch Ian Barry and Ronnie Bender, and asserted my authority over them to the point where the colonel thought I was planning to take over the regiment. I didn't see my actions in that light. But I had given several of these guys a going over. I was with a girl one night, and I looked up, and there was this self-styled tough guy, Ronnie Bender, sticking his tongue out. So I got up, and I said to him, "If you poke that tongue out again, I'll pull it out of your head." Then he goes, "You what?" So I gave him a little smack in the head, because you can't stand arguing too long with these people. Then I just stepped away, and he collapsed. But I'd scarcely hit him. And I looked around and saw that people were all staring. So when they saw me looking at them, they made out they weren't looking. I just walked away, and he went back whinging. I never did nothing. At that time, Bender was getting flash. He was a big, strong man, but a bully. As a fighter, he was a bit like that old heavyweight Brian London. If he threw the first punch and it hurt, then he was okay. But if you hurt him, he'd back off. Then I had to give one to Bender's brother. One night, 4 or 5 of us had gone into a packed club with a crowd of girls. Then he came in on us, and somebody said to him, "It's your turn to buy a drink." He said, "Oh, I'm skint. I ain't got any money." So we said, "Fair enough." And as each of us bought a round, we included him in. A bit later, I spotted him at the other end of the bar, pulling money out and buying little sneaky drinks. So I pulled him and I said, "What's all this?" And he said, "What's it got to do with you?" He was getting all flash in front of his little pals. So I grabbed hold of him and he just fell to pieces. I stood back. He was crying, trembling, sobbing his heart out in a packed club. He had tried his bluster, and when that didn't work, he collapsed. Why such people ever get called tough guys, I don't know. Then there was Scotch Ian Barry at the Regency. I walked in and I saw him sitting there with Tommy Cowley's wife, Adele, who was quite attractive. At first I thought, maybe they're waiting for Tommy to come. Then I turned around and I see they're kissing. At first I felt embarrassed. Then I said, "Turn that in now." I may sound like a hypocrite because I used to play around with other women when I was married, but the difference here is that we have one member of the firm playing with another member's wife and showing that man up. True, what they're doing is their own business really, but it's bound to cause bad feeling and might end up in murders and destroy our organization. And this was blatant in front of other members of the firm, not just me. So when Adele said, "What's it got to do with you?" I said, "You can shut your noise up, Tommy's my mate," because I wasn't impressed with her. Now Ian jumped up nice and smart, but he hasn't jumped up to go to the toilet, so when he came at me, I went for him. He scuttled along the bar and I just bundled him straight in the stockroom. I wedged him in a gap between stacks of crates and he was squealing, "Don't, don't." I was a bit disappointed. I was expecting a good fight with the man. But at that point, I knew I'd done him. He was a coward. You don't wait around having a row with these people, you just do them. I would give them a right good smacking until they asked me to stop. Then I knew that I'd done the guy in his head as well, just like I did the head of the dinner table over that bowl of spotted dick and custard back on my first day at St. Benedict's approved school. Beat one, beat the lot. Just as the twins had done on a more ruthless scale for years, before Reggie did the same to me, with a shot from behind. But this trouble with Scotch Lamb wasn't over yet, because when I went outside the Regency a little while later, I saw Adele's husband, Tommy Cowley, sitting in a car opposite with another guy. I thought they knew what had happened, so I said, "It's all finished. I've done here." And they said, "Get in, we'll run you home." I thought Tommy was all very relaxed about the fact his wife had been playing around with Scotch Ian. Then I realized they had been there on some totally different business. It was crossed wires, but now I had to explain what I had already let out. Well, Tommy wasn't too happy. Next morning, it's Face the Music time at the regular meet. This was now being held in the flat on the 9th floor of Braithwaite House near Old Street in the city, where Mr. and Mrs. Kray had moved when Valence Road was cleared for demolition. I was thinking, Christ, what's going to happen? I've just done Ronnie's man. None of us knew how Ron would react. We all waited till he came in, but there was nothing. He never spoke about it. Reggie asked me, "What happened there?" So I just said, "He got a bit flash, jumped up, come at me, so I done him." Maybe the Colonel had dismissed it as a silly quarrel over those silly things called wives. Maybe he was brooding on yet another disturbing sign of individualism and assertiveness by a mere lieutenant. He was certainly worried I was getting above myself. Yet even fallouts within the firm could serve his purpose. Sure, he and Reggie would smooth things over for the while. They'd take out the immediate sting, but they would carefully nurse any disagreement. Then if ever they themselves had trouble with me, they'd get hold of Ronnie Bender and Scotch Ian and stir them up for a week by saying, "I don't know why you stood for that. Why don't you go and do him?" They'd gradually work them into the mood to do me. Ronnie was well able to turn a dispute like that, even if it had happened a year before, into an opportunity to bring me into line. I'd seen how he stirred Scotch Jack against Connie Whitehead. I knew that was his game, but I also knew you can't just let these guys walk over you. You've got to show you have the beating of them, right from when the first argument breaks out. At the same time, I felt fairly secure in this side of my relationship with the twins. They didn't trust anybody else on the firm. Ronnie had put almost everyone on the list, so they just had to trust me. I'm not claiming I was invincible. I've had a few beatings myself. Sometimes I've been in crowd fights, and I've got done bottled. But these were just general fights, never when I was being attacked for myself or as a member of the firm, nothing where my own identity was on the line. But even in these encounters, I often came out on top. There was another time at the Regency when someone went, "Hold up," and I looked around and these three guys were coming at me. Then they split up on three sides of me. I didn't know this little firm, but I took my chances. I looked at them and went, "Oh well." Then I put my hand in my pocket. There was nothing in my pocket, but I just said, "It's a nice night for dying who's first." And they looked at each other and they slunk away. I couldn't believe it. The only tool I had with me that night was a bit of bluff. I was a lot wilder then than I am today. The fire's gone out a bit now, but I was still getting deliberately drunk every Tuesday downstairs at the Regency. In my own corner by the little door back up to the gym, I would stand at the bar with a big cut glass ashtray, and the drunker I got, the harder the smack I'd give anybody who came within reach. Everyone knew this, so they had guys standing outside range telling me jokes. I used to laugh at this myself. I was never legless. I just used to get nice and drunk and people used to leave me alone. Then I would always walk home. I'd walk from Whitechapel to Bow with no problems. You'd probably get mugged half a dozen times now. Well, that's all for this time, guys. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please join our Facebook group. It's called Krays Crime Lords of London. We're a friendly moderated group with over 1,000 Kray and other celebrated gangster videos available for view. There's also thousands of images in the photos sections. The link for the group is in the YouTube description section. I hope we see you there soon.
Leave a like and subscribe.